Hello and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. Now this week we're taking a look at the YouTube channel called Geeks and Gamers, which is nominally a kind of pop culture analysis commentary show, but just like Jeremy from the Quartering Show, it's really a way of trying to insert reactionary politics into relevancy. In this episode, he's got his panties in a bunch about Star Wars, so let's take a look.
What's up, Geeks and Gamers? It's Jeremy coming to you with another video, and
what is it with people called Jeremy and making this kind of content? It's weird, right?
Today we are talking about Lucasfilm, the High Republic, and the fact that Star Wars is not Star Wars anymore. And I'm past the point of being angry or upset about it. It's just a fact that Star Wars as we knew it, Star Wars as a property that George Lucas created and catapulted to the biggest thing that we've ever seen in the history of pop culture is no more. It just does not exist from that perspective.
So what's happened? Someone's got a time machine, gone back in time and shot George Lucas in the head before he was able to make the first 3 films? Probably not. So that's kind of a bit exaggerating the problem.
It only exists to be a social justice propaganda machine. And if you disagree with that, then you will be called a bigot, you will be called a racist, you'll be called a sexist. That is what Lucasfilm is doing.
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree that it's a propaganda machine. Does that mean I'm a racist? What? He said it backwards with a double negative. I'm making fun of him because he misspoke. I mean, the Star Wars property, as it is today, is as it was in the past. It exists pretty much solely to make money, and it will do anything it can do to achieve that goal, pretty much.
It does not represent Star Wars. I know the Bad Batch episode, or the trailer came out. I have not watched it. I'm not going to watch it. I'm probably not going to talk about any of it.
Now that's a great policy. I really wish you could take that policy and sort of extend it to include everything.
When it comes to moving forward with The Mandalorian or anything else, I don't care. I don't care because of things like this. And again, this is nothing to do with anybody that is a trans person or whatever. This is talking about how Lucasfilm uses identity politics. Uses identity politics to attack their fan base. That's what this is about.
Yeah, sure it is. Sure it is.
Because Lucasfilm is not about Star Wars. Lucasfilm is about identity politics. That's all this platform exists for.
Absolute nonsense. It exists to make money. That's all it cares about, making money, because it's a big corporation, and that's what big corporations do. They make profits, or at least attempt to do so. But here's the thing. I doubt this guy could even define identity politics. Like, what even is identity politics? Well, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it's a tendency for people of a particular religion, race, social background, etc. to form exclusive political alliances moving away from traditional broad-based party politics. I mean, I just don't really understand how this applies to Lucasfilm unless they're sort of excluding people based on their ethnicity, race, or whatever. I mean, I genuinely don't see the relevancy at all. The thing is, that's not really what identity politics means, even though that's the technical definition. Colloquially, it means something entirely different. It's a buzzword spread by these maniacs. Identity politics just means being inclusive, really. It means having representation of people other than cis white het males, and it includes calling people out for excluding people who don't fit that mold. That's all it really is. It's just a code word that they've developed, a way of describing not being a bigot. Because they love these little euphemisms that they use. You know, euphemisms like identity politics, or my favourite one, communism, which, when right-wingers say it, just means everyone who isn't a fascist. Because they've got to use this mealy-mouthed, buzzwordy, deceptive language, because if they really said what they are saying means, if they just cut the bullshit and just said, yeah, we're fascists and we want to exclude everyone and be bigots and have the right to do so because we're richer. If they said that, I think it would be a much harder sell. They'd certainly probably get kicked off YouTube and other other sort of places of polite society.
Anytime you see them giving you something that you remember or something that makes you excited, and I have fallen for that. I'm sure most Star Wars fans have fallen for that at one point in time or another. All it's meant to do is to keep you just slightly involved until the point where they can then call you the ist or the ism when you reject their nonsense.
You notice how he's being sort of very vague? What nonsense? When you reject what nonsense? And I think he's sort of skirting around being too specific about what exactly this nonsense, in inverted commas, would constitute, because largely it's just having a black person in it, or someone who's not straight or something, or having a scene where a woman tells a man what to do. You know, let's face it, I've got my criticisms of Star Wars. I thought The Last Jedi was absolute trash, because it was absolute trash. Not because it had a SJW agenda or something. I'd have liked if it did, you know. It had a garbled nonsense agenda that could barely be called an agenda because it was just a mess. It was an absolute mess. But just because they made a bad film, it's just got nothing to do with politics, except it's got everything to do with the people being in charge not knowing what the bloody they're doing, because they're there not to make art but to make money. So sooner or later you're gonna get turds like that. It's just what happens in capitalism, man.
That's what's going on. So here obviously we have this High Republic, and today's announcement that they only announced over on Facebook at first, and Data Racer has this 100% figured out. They posted this on Facebook, so you have to use your personal account to call them out, and then get doxxed and harassed by radical activists for your bigotry.
Easy way to avoid it, don't be a bigot. You know, doxing and harassment is generally not good, wouldn't advise it. I've been harassed online. It wasn't pleasant, but you know what I did? I just blocked them. You know, and if somebody approaches me in real life, I just call the police, because it's already illegal. It's stalking. It's anti-stalking laws. At least there are in the UK, and I assume there probably are something along those lines in America too. But, you know, largely, that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that people have extremely abhorrent opinions that they would rather only share anonymously, because they don't want to take the consequences, the social cost of being an absolute dickhead. That's what's really going on. You know, I've widely criticised the way that Star Wars has been going, or at least The Last Jedi, because that's when I stopped watching Star Wars, because I hated that film so much. I've been widely criticising it online in various places, and I've never been harassed by, certainly not left-wingers anyway, for my opinions on that film. You know why? Because it's just opinions on a film, and I can have opinions on a film and call it terrible trash of a film, because it is terrible trash, without having to become a transphobic, racist, misogynistic nightmare of a human being. Those things aren't necessarily connected, and if you don't do those things, you generally don't get called those things. I mean, I've been called a racist probably like twice in my life, and both times it was by people who were self-identifying Nazis. So I don't really take those accusations seriously. And why is it that I've only been accused twice of racism by Nazis? It's because I'm not a racist. That's why. I'm not going around being racist or bigoted, you know? And that really is the best defense against being called those things.
Now we remember this image. We remember this image with the High Republic. Diversity and representation with diversity listed again. That was some of the big selling points for this. And this is this is what you can realize from Lucasfilm as a whole. Everything they're doing, it's about diversity, representation.
It's about money, you idiot. Because what do you think happens when they put diversity and representation into things? Think about it for like 10 seconds. You know, get your head out of your ass. Think about it. Without using a moronic chud lens. Diversity means more types of people in a film. The reason they're doing this is because the more types of people in a film, the more types of people they're hoping to attract. It's for the same reason that when you go into a toy shop, for example, if those still exist anymore, on the packaging they have images of children playing with the toys. You know, it's the same reason they introduced Robin in Batman and Robin. Why? Because to appeal to an audience that they perceive to be like Robin. They try to put people who are like the audience they want to get into their things. The more different types of people they put into their things, the more different types of people they're hoping to market this to. That's all it is. They just want money. Not only that, there is a more diverse group of people creating this media. In the past, it was pretty much all cis-het white males manufacturing our culture, but now we have a lot more voices involved, and so they're going to want to have people in their stories that represent themselves. It's part of their artistic vision, part of the way they see the world. And what you're asking them to do is curtail artists' visions. Curtail the artists' visions to make the product less profitable. It's completely insane. It doesn't make sense from a capitalist perspective. It doesn't make sense from an artistic perspective. It doesn't make sense, period.
And then calling the real Star Wars fans out there all of these names. It's meant to pull you in just so they can call you the ists and the isms, because they've created this boogeyman. They've created this boogeyman of people, these wide-ranging number. The entire country is running rampant with all of these ists and these isms, which they really isn't. There are some people that are those things. They're very small in numbers, and they're very much insignificant.
Again, with the totally absurd diversionary tactic of trying to claim that these things aren't a threat to us, when you're literally one of them. And presumably the people watching your channel are those things too. Unless, I assume that there are a sizable percentage who hate watching your videos because they think you're funny. Not intentionally. Funny in the sense that what you say is ridiculous. That you're literally talking to a group of people, a large group of people, who are upset because they've put a non-binary character in something. And then you're saying that there's no problem with, bigotry. Those two things don't make sense. The very existence of this video contradicts the contents of it.
The real ist and the real isms are very insignificant. But what they have done is they have decided that when we push identity politics into this universe, this pre-existing universe,
it's not pushing identity politics to include a character who is non-binary any more than it is to include a character who is not non-binary. None of those things are identity politics. Now, that's the fundamental problem of this. They're trying to act like they're the victims because they just don't want to see characters who aren't like them in things. Talk about snowflakes. Unbelievably fragile. And the thing is, if their criticisms were just about sort of shallow characters and poorly drawn plots and, just generally bad filmmaking, I'd be right behind them because there is a lot of that around, That's some legitimate criticisms, I would say. I agree with them on that. But the moment you start bringing up the tangential, bizarre nonsense of identity politics in connection to that, it's just total rubbish, and it just completely negates any of the points you might have had, because it shows that your judgment is so poor that any criticism that you might have ceases to be legitimate. If what you are saying is true and they were pushing identity politics at the cost of decently crafted media, the way that you are addressing it would be completely counterproductive. It would be playing perfectly into their hands. Because if you really have a problem with the way that the characters are drawn, and you have no problem with representation and diversity in reality, then stop talking about it then. Just address the actual problems of crappy characterization and poor plots. Just address that. But the thing is, that's not really what this guy's interested in doing, this Jeremy is interested in doing. He's deliberately trying to tie those two things together. He's trying to tie together the idea that if you didn't enjoy that film, then you're in the same camp as the people who can't stand to see a female character with volition or a black lead or whatever. He's trying to conflate those two ideas so that it makes it easier to take a person who didn't like what they've done with Star Wars and slip them over into reactionary politics. It's basically, do you remember, and maybe people who are listening to this might be too young, and maybe this is showing my age, but there used to be this thing called the War on Christmas on Fox News with, what was he called? Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly would do this thing every year, would overblow this fictional idea of the War on Christmas, which was basically this chaotic windmill of a concept where imaginary figures from the atheist left were coming for your Christmas traditions when they weren't. It was nonsense. And the reason that he was doing it is just trying to get Christians to see the left as their enemy, and therefore join his reactionary right nonsense. This guy on Geeks and Gamers, he's just doing exactly the same thing, but with Star Wars. He's trying to trump up this idea that the left is coming for your nerd culture, which is just bollocks. It's just bollocks, because it's the left who made it in the first place. It's the artists and creatives that made all this stuff that you love. People who are on the left, because those two ideas naturally tessellate nicely. The right have been consistently trying to harm artists' ability to continue being artists since, like, the inception of the right wing in the first place. Removing arts funding and other things. That's usually the first thing that right-wing governments do, is cut all funding to the arts. And now you've got a kind of modern version of it where they've got slightly less power, but these idiots online are trying to curtail what kind of things artists can include in their expression of art. But they're not going to win. They're not going to win. Because in future, there won't be anyone who will call this identity politics or diversity or inclusion or whatever else. It would just be like what art is, what media is. Because essentially what these people are is King Canute standing on the beach and shouting at the tide to not rise. But it's gonna rise, and you're gonna drown. And the rest of us will have a lovely beach holiday. Because come on in, the water is lovely and warm. And there's room for everyone. At least everyone who's not gonna piss in it. Hope you enjoyed this video. With peace and love, Hippie Hyena out.